intelligent travelers. We're so glad you came out today. Welcome to the Iowa Files. This is the 5th year for this free educational program that we do in partnership with the West Des Moines Library, so we're so thrilled to have you here. The Iowa Files is sponsored by donors and members to the West Des Moines Historical Society, Diana and Scott Hatfield, the West Des Moines Library, the Friends Foundation of the West Des Moines Library, and the Iowa Arts Council. So we have a really interesting and thank goodness last minute shoe-in presenter that I think is going to be fabulous. If you're not up for Donner Party jokes, you might as well leave the room now. Kent Halstead is in his 38th year of teaching, and his 12th year teaching history to 8th graders in Indianola. His lessons are renowned because they're not just educational, but they're a lot of fun too. His students not just learn from a book, they're part of a creative process. They're up, they're out of their chairs, they're doing projects, and amazing things to stretch their minds, like turning the U.S. Constitution into a comic book for the younger grades to use. He teaches students how to think about history and understand how the past has shaped our country to the present day, which is really one of the Historical Society's goals and missions as well. So we are absolutely thrilled to welcome educator Kent Halstead.
Thank you. And who is this? Who is this group? John, Keith, Peter, Roger. Who is it? It's the Who. Who is it? It's the Who. And you can just call me Kent, and my wife is Laurel right back there, and she's nice enough to come today. So it's the Who. And look at those haircuts from Great Clips. Wow, they must have had a coupon, is my point. I think they had a coupon, okay? But people love history, and there's Roger Daltrey, and this is what he does now, is he produces shows called Extreme History, and I use some of them in my class. So there's a huge connection between music and history, and I use that a lot in my presentations, okay? I can tell all you love history, that's why you're here, okay? And the power of learning together, I cannot write it any better than this. The power of being in the same group, learning together. That's powerful.
Okay, I read these books, and I'm Jacob, and I like this one the best because you got some tobacco to keep yourself and your hole in your ditch, and I like that. I don't like books.
So if you heard that at the end, that's the power of being in school. It's the power of being in this group, learning together. So he doesn't like books, but he liked that book because we got to talk about that book.
Is that your class?
Yeah. And the name of that book is called Night John. It's by Gary Paulson. It's about a 7-year-old girl named Sarnie, and she uses tobacco to kill bugs at the enslaver's house. And he comes in naked, and he wants to trade something for tobacco. An 11-year-old girl says, "What do you have to trade, Night John?" He says, "Guess what? I know how to read and write." So he teaches Sarnie the letter A, B, and C. Some of the letters bug her a lot because she doesn't understand how they stand up. But so that's what that book's about, and that's the power of learning together as a group in our WIN class. So here's the real name of my presentation today, and it certainly is a privilege to be here and get to share some history with you. But yes, you can laugh and joke and things like that, please. I didn't go to Harvard or Yale. I went to the university. Okay, just so you know that. Okay? So I just thought we'd start with a few maps to set the scene. And the key word up there for me is, what do you think the key word is up there? That sticks out like an index finger sometimes. What do you think the key word is? And you're just predicting. There's no wrong answer. You're just predicting. You don't have to go see the assistant principal. You don't have detention. Okay? What's the key word up there? It starts with a B. British. I just think that's so important to show us that we were certainly British. Okay? And we just never see that. So British is huge. And when we were the colonies, people did not think it was possible to control the whole continent. It's too big. The Spanish is going to be there. The French is going to be there. People didn't think there's no way we can take over the whole continent. It was a goal, but it wasn't really reality, because you think about Europe, you think about Asia, one country doesn't control the whole thing. So that was a definition that they had in their heads. It'd just be too hard to control that.
Manifest destiny, this idea of expansion to the United States across the continent, was coined by a New York newspaperman, John L. Sullivan, in 1845. And he used the phrase first in July of that year, talking about the United States should annex Texas. But more importantly, he then used it in an editorial in December of 1845, in which he argued that the United States already owned the Oregon country because of international law that today we call the Doctrine of Discovery. But he also said that it is our manifest destiny to overgrow this entire continent, and that God...
So I always tell students manifest destiny is a concept. It's a hot dog you can put mustard on. You can't put mustard on a concept. It's out there. Okay?
So we came, we tamed the savage land. We cut trees down till the ground to build up towns to settle in and raised our kin to forsake our sin. Now our path we plainly see is every inch of the land must be thrived in the...
Okay, what's the next two words? Manifest destiny is right.
Oh, manifest destiny.
So just a little background on it. It's an attitude prevalent. In 1491, the Pope said, we have a mission to take over lands of non-Christians and take over them and change them. So we had a mission to do, and many people fulfilled that mission very well to do that. But that is about manifest destiny. Okay? Just a couple words I use that I used to really struggle with. People went from the United States to Mexico in 1847. On the way there, were they an immigrant with an E or an immigrant with an I? What were they on the way there from the United States to Mexico? E or I? They were an E on the way. Once they got to Mexico, what were they? They were an I. So you'll hear me use those terms a little bit. I just kind of wanted to set the scene for that, and I didn't know that, and I like word choice for that. So this was kind of the promo for today. I use it in my classroom quite a bit, but we don't memorize it. Here's how we do it. We have questions about this. Here's one of the questions. How is the history of transportation embedded in the painting? So I have kids in groups, and they have to sell their answer. Here's an example of some kids selling their answer. So then I divvy out points, and I have other teachers come in the room, and they get rewarded for higher order thinking skills. If they just say, there's a girl in the painting, they get nothing. But if they go above and beyond that, they get more points. So it's a way to reward kids for thinking and talking. So that's one of the things I would do in my classroom.
As the number and size of the ranches increased, the cowboy population increased also, eventually numbering about 40,000. The cowboys came from many walks of life. A few were educated men from the eastern United States, from Britain, and from Europe. Some were adventurers, some drifters, and others...
Oh, what was your name in the States? Was it Thompson, or Johnson, or Bates? Did you murder your wife and run for your life? What was your name in the States?
What was your name in the States? Was it Thompson, Johnson, or Bates? Did you murder your wife and run for your life? What was your name in the States? Why was it not polite to ask what your name in the States was? Just go ahead and predict. Otherwise you will have Saturday school if you don't predict.
There were people running away from their past.
Yes, exactly. They were running away from the law, many people in the West. And the West has always had that connotation. And there's some of these people right there. They're on the run from the law.
We're on the run from the law. For this reason, it was not considered proper in the Western territories to ask a man about his background.
I've got a mule, her name is Sal, 15 miles on the...
Answer? And there it is.
15 miles on the Erie Canal, she's a good old...
Remember, the Erie Canal was the West for a long time. And what I'm so spoiled about is I can play 5 seconds of a song. I don't ever have to do anything. I can walk around, because proximity is really important with 8th graders. So I can do anything I want. Okay, let me go back a little bit. Okay, what invention led to no more cowboys? What invention led to no more cowboys? No. No. Let's see.
He rides the feedlot, clerks at a market, all weekend selling tobacco and beer.
Remington showed us how he looked on canvas, and Louis L'Amour has told us his tale.
This is Transition Trail covered in concrete now. They come to market in beautiful rigs. They roll by with marker and don't even notice it. Like living and dying is all they get.
Nailed it, barbed wire is right. So it's a way to teach about barbed wire, and I love the Highwayman. Who are they? Cash, Waylon Jennings, Chris Christopherson, and Willie Nelson. Yeah, Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, Chris Christopherson, and Waylon Jennings. And so it's a way I get to use music in my classroom. It's not the same kind of music all the kids get to listen to, but barbed wire changed the American West because now cowboys live in the market selling tobacco and beer. How many people have heard that song before? Has anybody heard it before? Did you know it was about barbed wire? See, that's the power of music in our teaching. So a lot of the pictures you're going to see are by this guy, Solomon D. Butcher, and he figured out people were making history in Nebraska, the West. I just wanted to give him credit for these pictures. You can see his lifespan. So now you just get to shout, and there he is. That's him. Okay? How did he take these pictures? Using glass plates is how he took them. He put a chemical on them, and that's where the word film comes from. And then he would carry these glass plates around. That's him. Okay? Okay. Yes or no? Is there a cow on the roof? No. Answer is no. It's just a book. Okay? Is there really a cow on the roof? No. Nebraska pioneer family in front of their sod house with the cow. And even has their names. Emma Ledbetter, Rodding, Sylvester Rodding, daughter Bessie, sons Philip, William, and Harry. And there's their sod house. How come they were so proud of this picture? Why do you think? So they got their picture taken how many times in their life? One, and they never saw it. Okay? They never saw it. So that's why pictures were always a big deal for people, because they didn't have their whole life on their phone like kids. Okay? Okay. Did settlers walk or ride on the Oregon Trail? What do you predict? Did they walk or did they ride in those wagons? What do you predict? Okay, and I love it when I can share the answer with a video.
Hollywood image is everybody gets in the wagon and rides. Nobody gets in the wagon and rides. Everybody walks. You can walk just as
everybody walked. As most of you know, it was too hot, too dry, too dusty, and they were churning butter with the wagons. Okay?
This year marks the 40th anniversary of the Oregon Trail, not the historic path of Western expansion, but perhaps the most popular educational computer game of all time. Ah, yes. Fording the river, changing a broken wagon wheel, dying of dysentery.
How many people played it before? Oregon Trail. So two unemployed social studies teachers in 1976, they lived in Minneapolis and they got laid off, and so they made this game, but they couldn't sell it. How come they couldn't sell it for about 15 years? Do you know why they could not sell the game? Because nobody had their own personal computer. There was no way to sell it. So they had a good idea, but there was no market for it. You had to have a phone line and a modem to play it. So that's why it took a long time, but they eventually did make money from it. Okay, Stephen Long came through Iowa in 1819. What did he call this area? Did he call it the Great Plains, the Great American Desert, or the Corn Belt?
Interstate 80, Iowa.
Mississippi River, Davenport. Corn, 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 corn. What's that smell? Corn, 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 Iowa City. Corn, 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 corn. Look, a tree. Corn, 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 come on. Corn, 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 corn. There's that smell again. Corn, 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 comes from the Missouri River.
Again, here's the answer.
Missouri. It may be frontier, it may be rugged, but it's still recognizable America. It still is landscape that has been subdued by the American imagination in the 18th and the first half of the 19th century. But after Missouri, once you push west into what is the Great American Desert, in fact, that's what many maps show this landscape as the Great.
So, American Desert is what Iowa was labeled, and that's why people skipped Iowa, because they didn't think anything would grow here. And that's why Native Americans like the Winnebagos, the Sauk, the Fox, who eventually became the Meskwaki, were moved to Iowa because they didn't think anything would grow here. Once we found out wheat was our first crop, would grow here, then those Native Americans were moved to Oklahoma or Kansas, where most of them were put in a nice reservation where most of them died. Okay? Okay, 1844. This was the first wagon train to go across the Sierra Nevadas. Is this before or after the gold rush? It's before the gold rush. That's what's remarkable about it. It wasn't the Donner Party. It was this party, Stevens Townsend Murphy Party. And they left from Council Bluffs, Iowa. They were a remarkable set of people. They got along. They had good leaders. They voted on things. They started with 50 people. They ended up with 52 because 2 of the women had babies on the way. Then they kept walking. They were remarkable women on this journey, the Stevens Townsend Murphy Party. It's called the Forgotten Journey because nobody remembered it until this lady was doing research at the University of Nebraska in the 1980s, and she stumbled upon the records of this group in some of their diaries. But it was a success, so nobody remembered it. The Donner Party was in 1846, so we compare and contrast that a little bit. And Major Stephen Long called the region the Great American Desert. He considered the area almost unfit for cultivation and, of course, uninhabitable by a people depending on agriculture for their subsistence because it was flat, treeless, and arid. What do we depend on today? Is agriculture, certainly. But that's one of the, oh my goodness, look at this family. Look at them. They're pretty proud, aren't they? They're pretty proud. There they are. They're proud as heck. The Paris Hilton family, it's really the Hilton family. I added Paris. The Paris Hilton family did not want to show that they still lived in what kind of house to their friends back east, but they wanted to prove they owned an organ in Custer County, Nebraska. What were they embarrassed about? A sod house, exactly. They insisted on having the organ hauled out so that they were embarrassed that they lived in a sod house. And that was not uncommon. That's why you see these pictures sometimes. Okay? Families had snakes dropping down from the rafters right onto the table at dinner time. Getting up in the morning, folks learned to look under their bed and first and saw many snakes. Early in the afternoon, the rattlesnakes would come out of the dens in the walls and would sun themselves. The house was built of dirt and grass. It was infected with bugs, mice, snakes, and other varmints and vermin. Yeah, the Hilton family in Custer County, Nebraska, which is by Loop City, Nebraska. So west of Lincoln, about probably 150 miles northwest. Yeah, yeah, no. Okay, these ladies fascinate me. And there they are. And I always have their names, because kids need their names. Hattie, Lizzie, Ludi, and Ruth are their names. That's just an amazing picture. Okay? What government program were they trying to get land from? Homesteading, sharecropping, land lottery, or squatting on Native American land? What do you predict? Lizzie filed the first claim, Ludi the following year. The sisters took turns living with each other so they could fulfill the residence requirements without living alone.
To sail out west, farm some land so we can expand. Homesteaders.
Any U.S. citizen who had never borne arms against the U.S. could lay claim to 160 acres of government land. For 5 years, the homesteader had to live on the land and prove it by building a 12 by 14 dwelling and growing crops. Did they all make it? Not at all. It was hard. They brought stuff to have tea parties with. The women did. The men brought things to hunt with. They brought hunting rifles. They didn't bring shovels and seeds and how to plant. They didn't have any neighbor within 10 miles, and there was no bridge, and their neighbor spoke a different language. So it was very hard life to stay there that long. When a lot of people moved to Nebraska in the 1880s, things were going really well. They had lots of rain. They had good weather. They had schools. They had churches. Everything was going really well. And then the Depression of the 1890s hit, where they had regular rainfall. And the prices went down from corn from 38 cents a bushel to 12 cents a bushel. The railroads never changed their prices. And so that's when many people left Nebraska in the 1880s. Custer County had 25,000 people in 1880. Today it has 1,500 people. So you can see the effect that all that stuff had on, and there's their remarkable women, aren't they? And I just love showing that picture. Yeah, tiny little house. Exactly, exactly. And obviously there's no trees. There's no grandparents going to Costco. I mean, this is serious. Okay? Okay, you can't, it's cut off a little bit, but what are they hauling in that barrel? What would be so valuable they'd haul in that barrel? Is it whiskey, 8th graders? Is it whiskey? What are they hauling, do you think? What would be that valuable in Old Mexico to haul? Water. Exactly, it's just water. Yeah, it was just that valuable. John Wesley Powell went down the Grand Canyon, to the Grand Canyon in 1869, and he had one arm. His other arm got shot off the Battle of Shiloh, April 5th, 1862. But he went down the Green River to the Colorado, ended up in the Grand Canyon, and he came back and testified at Congress in Washington, D.C., and he said, the West is beautiful, but it lacks water, and people are going to fight over water forever. And that's what he said in 1869. His name was John Wesley Powell, and he was a college professor from Illinois, but he was also a veteran. So water was huge to fight about. Okay, what part of the Oregon Trail is this? I'll let you look at it for a little bit. What part of the Oregon Trail? Do you think it's the beginning of the Oregon Trail, the middle, or the end? And yes, you need choices when you have 8th graders. They need to have choices up there. It keeps them engaged. It gives them hope. Okay? Is beginning, middle, or end? What do you predict? And you can go ahead and talk too. What do you predict? Defend your answer. Beginning, okay? Okay. Okay, answer is the end. They would have never started the Oregon Trail with a cow and 2 donkeys. It just wouldn't have worked. It would have been, so that is the end of the Oregon Trail. Okay? But you can see, just having us predict history it's not true false. There's no right or wrong answer. And that's how I love to teach, because every person loves to learn. We just have to get them to throw away fear of failure, and also they're just learning. They're not being graded, they're not being judged, they're just in here learning. And so that's kind of the way I love to teach my classes. Thomas Jefferson was convinced that explorers might have run-ins with herds of giant woolly mammoths and sloths in 1804. Okay? Okay, now we're going to go to some animals, and this is another way I get kids' attention. So the bison, you can see, bison went from that to 500,000 today. Okay? Okay, what was this family most likely to die on the Oregon Trail? Go ahead and predict. What do you think they died of the most? Cholera. Everyone has cholera. Continually watery diarrhea was cholera. You were okay in the morning. At noon, you started getting sick, and then you were dead by 3 o'clock. That's what happened with cholera.
Is that from bad water?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, San Francisco Harbor, 1848. You need the year. Where's the people? Where's the crews? Are they on strike? Are they sleeping? They all quit to look for gold, or are they below deck working? What do you predict? They all quit to look for gold big time. And they just left their ships there. Okay? Okay, what is this photo about using evidence? 1891, Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in southwestern South Dakota, right by Mission, South Dakota. Again, is this a cattle auction? Is it beef issued to Indians or a cattle roundup for the railroad? Answer is B. Long row of Lakota men on horseback preparing to rope cattle. A few on horseback are galloping toward the cattle. So, since they were wards of the United States, they got food from the United States, but they had to make their own food after we gave them cattle. Okay? Okay, what is this photo about using evidence? Is it a Native American village with teepees and permanent buildings, a United States-sponsored school for all students, or an Indian boarding school? Very good. It's an Indian boarding school. The goal was to use education as a tool to assimilate Indian tribes into the mainstream of the American way of life, to civilize Indian people, make them accept white man's beliefs and value systems. And if you know who Metukum was, his real name is Jim Thorpe today. He was the most valuable athlete from 1900 to 1950. His relatives were Sauk and Fox, Native Americans from Iowa. Remember, Native American tribes changed their name quite a bit because they had to go together. They became the Meskwaki. Because once they were persecuted, Native American tribes had to merge and go together. Dakota, Lakota, Sioux, the same thing. But Jim Thorpe's relatives were from Iowa, present-day Iowa, and he was moved to Oklahoma, and he went to Haskell Indian School, and eventually went to Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, and became the world's greatest athlete from 1900 to 1950. Okay? Oh my goodness. Do you dig the hole before or after you go to the bathroom? It's before. Okay? How many people have seen this movie? Mr. Fredrickson? Up. Okay? Yeah, there it is right there. But here's my question. What the heck are they doing? They have telescopes to see the newly discovered planet of Mars in 1868. Are they cloud seeding to make it rain in the West in 1881? Are they setting up a 4th of July fireworks in Dodge City, Kansas in 1871? Look how fancy they are. Look at this. What are they doing, you think? They are cloud seeding. Deliberate introduction into the clouds of various substances. They got paid $10,000 to make it rain, and sometimes it did rain. And they would go from town to town chasing thunderstorms and saying it's going to rain, and they got paid to do it. Yeah, yeah. Did it work? Sometimes it worked. Yeah, but not that often. Okay, again, how did Western migration impact animals? This is another way to hook kids into learning. You can see the blue, or you can see the yellow and you can see the beige. What animal do you predict this was? There's their current range to give you some more information. Only in Yellowstone, only in Glacier Bay National Park, in grizzly bears. Grizzly bear once roamed throughout the entire West. 98% of their original habitat is gone. Okay? And you can see in the western United States, it became fashionable to have a grizzly bear rug. It became an icon of the American West to shoot a grizzly bear. And so that's what happened to a lot of them. Okay? Okay. My wife and I went to Arizona 2 years ago. Okay? A number on the screen is a big deal. Why? A number on the screen is a big deal. Okay? Oh, you can't see the number very well. It's just too dark. The number is 100 degrees west. Why do you think that's a big deal on our GPS? Because you can't farm without irrigation. Once you get west of 100 degrees, that's known as the meridian of you have to have irrigation to do it. Okay, dry farm without irrigation, and that's where that line is. So the West is obviously known for that. Okay, and do people fight out of the Ogallala Aquifer? Do they fight to take water out of there? You have to have rights to do it. Sure, they do. And look at Nebraska. Nebraska owes a lot of corn, but 98% of it is irrigated, as most of you know. Okay? Okay, one of my favorite questions. What animal disappeared from Arizona, but it's native to Arizona, but has recently seen again on trail cameras? The blank is the largest cat in the Americas. Here's your choices. Native to Arizona, but it disappeared. But now it's been seen again in Arizona on trail cams. What do you predict? Very good. There it is. Okay. 1804 to 1806, I just wanted to give you a little map of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Thomas Jefferson had this expedition planned long before he bought the Louisiana Purchase from France. He really struggled with buying Louisiana Purchase. He was a Democratic Republican, and they believed in strict interpretation of the Constitution. He did not think he had the right to buy the Louisiana Purchase. It really bugged him for a long time. But his Secretary of State, James Madison, said, it's on sale. We get 5 cents off gas at Hy-Vee. We need to buy it. So eventually he relented and he bought the Louisiana Purchase. But he had this expedition planned for a long time to go west. His personal secretary was Meriwether Lewis. He sent Meriwether Lewis back to college to learn how to document flora and fauna. They met 48 Native American tribes on the way there. They stayed in North Dakota in 1804. They stayed at Fort Clatsop in 1805. They split up, and eventually they got back to St. Louis in 1806. And it certainly was an epic expedition, but reminder, it was a military expedition. It was sponsored by the U.S. government. They had supplies. It's a lot different than a family walking to California or Oregon where they got nothing. And if they don't make it, they don't get 320 acres. If they made it to Oregon, they did. If they don't make it, they die of dysentery. So it was an epic expedition, but it certainly was a government expedition also. Sacagawea, Sacagawea, Sac in the Box. Sacagawea. She was a Shoshone, but she got traded to the Mandan, to the Hidatsu, and so when they got to Fort Mandan in North Dakota, they needed an interpreter. And her husband, who bought her and another wife from the Hidatsu, he applied for the job. And I always wondered how many French fur trappers there were in North Dakota in 1804. Like one? There was a lot of them. Because guess what they did? They divided up Native American tribes. You get to exploit the Mandan. You get to exploit the Ojibwe. You get to exploit the Sioux. And so they divided up Native American tribes kind of like a deck of cards. You get to exploit them. So there was actually a lot of French fur trappers in North Dakota in 1804. And eventually the Lewis and Clark expedition, as you know, makes it back. When they got the Fort Clatsop, they voted where to put it. They built it out of wood. The original's not there today, but there is a fort there today. It was made to do that. They also had a letter of credit from Thomas Jefferson. If you see a ship in the ocean, you can hitch a ride back, and the United States government will pay for it. So they had a line of credit, like a Visa card from Thomas Jefferson. But let's go a little deeper. This is from their journal. The fog's so thick this morning, we could not see a man 50 steps off. The fog detained us until 10 o'clock, at which time we set out accompanied by our Indian friends who are from supposedly Mount Hood, is 85 degrees east, about 47 miles distance from the mouth of the Quicksand River. The mountain is covered with snow. So when they were going east to west, guess what they saw? They saw Mount Hood, even though they'd never been there before. And they knew it was huge to see it. My next question is, why? Why did they know about Mount Hood? There it is. Okay? A, they had a primitive map of the route. B, they had seen pictures of Mount Hood in the ocean. C, the Walla Walla Indian tribe had told them about once they saw Mount Hood that they'd be 125 miles from the ocean. Or D, ship captains had sailed by present-day Oregon and noted in their journals. How did they know when they saw Mount Hood that was a huge day for them because they knew they were going to make it? Answer is, and that's Portland, by the way, as most of you know. Answer is D. George Vancouver had sailed by there in 1785, and in his journals, he put where he could see Mount Hood, and he named it after one of the people on the ship, Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, Mount Baker. And so that's how they knew, even though they'd never seen Mount Hood before, once they got there. So that's the power of doing research. Okay, what year? 1974. Okay?
He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord, but his soul goes marching.
Today on Wait, Don't Tell Me, we will be exploring the topic of who was John Brown. I will read you 3 stories about John Brown.
Kind of like NPR, huh? This is how I get kids interested in John Brown. Here we go.
Welcome back, contestants, to our game show of Bluff the Listener. Our next topic. Who did John Brown have supper with the night before he was executed on December 2nd, 1859? Option 1, the jailer and the jailer's wife, who was going to hang him the next day. Yeesh. Option number 2, his second wife, Mary Ann, and 8 of the 20 kids that John Brown had. Or do you think it's option 3? He had supper with Abe Lincoln and Robert E. Lee on the night before he was executed on December 2nd, 1859. Well, if you said option 3, you are incorrect, because it is option number 1, the jailer and the jailer's wife, who he was going to hang him the next day. Ooh, tough. This is Mr. Weepy, signing off.
The jailer and the jailer's wife. Okay, here we go.
John Brown executed December 2nd.
And this is me talking.
Where's he buried 100 years later in 1859? Where's his body? Number 1, he's buried in Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C. as a national hero after his body was reinterred after he was previously buried at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. And then was buried again at Arlington National Cemetery, national hero. Number 2, he's buried on his former farm in North Elba, New York. Number 3, he's buried in Boston's Granary Burial Ground. It's the 3rd oldest burial ground in the city of Boston. And within lay the graves of Paul Revere, Samuel Adams, and John Brown.
1, 2, or 3? 2. There's his. He's buried on his farm in North Elba, New York. And we could talk about John Brown for the rest of our lives. He was executed December 2nd, 1859. He spent tons of time in Tabor, tons of time in West Branch, and time also in Des Moines, and including the Jordan House in Des Moines, in West Des Moines. Okay? Okay, now let's get to the downer party. Remember when you were in 8th grade, every kid wanted to move to California? We wanted to go skiing in the morning and go to the beach in the afternoon. What happened to us? Who wanted to go to California? At the start of the spring, this appeared in the Springfield, Illinois Gazette. That's where they left from. They left from Springfield, Illinois. That's from last year. But on the bottom, they estimate the year they got stuck in the mountains, they had 93 feet of snow, 1,012 inches, because they sawed off the trees, and that's one of the ways they know. They think they had 93 feet of snow that winter at Donner Pass, and it's 7,085 feet, so it's not obviously that high either. Okay? Here is the lake. It was not called Donner Lake then, but this is the lake they got stuck at. Okay? In the Donner Party tragedy, 2/3 of the men in the party perished, while 2/3 of the women and children lived. 41 individuals died and 46 survived. Okay? Why did more men die than women? Why do you think? Why did more men die than women? But who are the women staying alive for? Their kids. Yep, the maternal instinct kicked in, and women kept themselves alive and their kids. Here's another reason. Men tasted better. Okay? It's another reason men tasted better. Okay. Louis Keseberg was the only one of the Donner Party that bragged about eating human flesh after it was over. It wasn't like Pizza Ranch. They did not go back for seconds, 8th graders. It wasn't like that. They ate to stay alive. There was not much cannibalism. It was only at the lake. It wasn't on the other groups. It's been much sensationalized. But he did brag of eating human flesh. Guess what he did later? He opened up a restaurant, and he served mystery meat, and nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew what he was serving, but they liked it. They said it tasted like Salisbury steak, like when you were in school. Okay? Okay, the Forlorn Hope, and I love that word, forlorn, was 15 members of the Donner Party that left the main party to hike down the Sierra Nevadas to get help. So their wagons couldn't get through, their minivans couldn't get through, but individual people could. So 15 people called Forlorn Hope went for help. Okay? 2 Donners from Forlorn Hope were at Casey's buying lunch. They had a coupon for buy one clown, get one free, and I saw them there the other day. The one Forlorn Hoper said he did not like clowns because they taste. He did not like them. They taste funny. 1846. Did you know George Donner was let out of the jail on bail today? What was his bail? How did he get out? I heard it cost him an arm and a leg. 2 Donner partiers were eating the best meal they've had in ages. The one Donner Party said, "Your wife sure makes a good roast," commented the first Donner. "Your wife sure makes a good roast." "Yeah," replied the second, "I'm really going to miss her." Remember, I teach 8th grade. Okay? James Reed. James Reed wanted to be the leader of the Donner Party, but he got banished, and he actually got sent away, and he's one of the first people to come back and save them, going from west to east. He wanted to be the leader of the Donner Party, but James Reed was banished from the Donner Party instead for murder. What was his favorite game, James Reed? Swallow the leader, because he wanted to be the leader, but he didn't get to be. Okay? Louis Keseberg was the only Donner Party member who bragged of eating human flesh. So here is his restaurant. Louis Keseberg in 1848 opened up a restaurant in Truckee, California. Overheard at his restaurant near Truckee in the Sierra Mountains. Donner Party of 8. Then there was a pause. "Your table's ready." "Excuse me, we now only have 7 in our party. Appetizer." You have no pride. Donner Family Recipe Book. Title of it: How to Serve Your Fellow Woman or Man. Okay. was not like Pizza Ranch. They did not go back for seconds. They eat to stay alive. Two Donners were sitting by a fire eating lunch. The first says, gee, I hate my mother-in-law. So the other one says, so try the potatoes. Remember, 80, what did all the Donners get? When did they all get to leave the table? Any predictions out here? When did they get to leave the table? When everyone's eaten. When everyone's eaten. Thanks for coming today, by the way. What did Jacob Donner get when he was late for dinner? Isabella Donner was 1 when she made it to California in 1847. She died in 1935, the last surviving member of the Donner Party. What did Jacob get when he was late for dinner? Got the cold shoulder. Yeah, he got the cold shoulder. Okay? Okay, what did the Donners eat for dessert? I don't want to end with that. I want to end with the 1970s. So we got a couple more minutes. I do a lot of theme things in my classroom. So this is the 1970s. This is a puzzle I have. You recognize any of the 70s? Okay? So I zoom in on lots of things in this. I just have 3 of them for you to show you. And you got to figure out what they're about. So as soon as I hit you can talk. Go ahead and talk. After I showed that, answer? What is that? No, it's not a Pinto. What is it? It's a Gremlin. 70s. Look at this.
Oh, gosh.
We first featured this purple 1972 AMC Gremlin X in our Muscle Car and Corvette National show coverage. So, no, you're not seeing double. There are times when we feature cars from the Brothers Collection at events when we couldn't shoot them in motion. So when we had the chance to wheel this little 304 powered X-Box around a bit, we decided to have some fun with it.
That scares kids, a Gremlin as a car. Okay, go ahead and talk. Last one. Very good.
Platforms for men. Why? I think men want to be taller than their women.
Prior to the 70s, men wore elevator shoes to boost their height, but platform shoes replaced them. Not just for the altitude, but the attitude. But style is democratic, and men lost a little stature when women took up platforms too.
So that ends my presentation. I just want to tell you a couple things. It's a privilege to be a teacher. I would teach history without getting paid. I make $90,000 a year, and I don't need to get paid nothing. I don't ever plan on retiring, at least for a while. And this is my 38th year in the PTL. The PTL is the Professional Teachers League. But what drives me the most is I don't want to let kids down. I have kids coming in my classroom, and I don't want to let them down. They need an experience. They need conversations. We take no true-false tests, no ABCD tests. Those are boring to me. I can't even think about looking at those. We talk to each other. a normal day in my classroom, kids are out of their seat and there's no desk, and they're around the room talking. And that's a normal day in my room, including tomorrow, would be an example. But it's just simply a privilege to be a teacher. And so I just want to tell you, I don't need a parking spot at Hy-Vee. I just need kids coming in my room, because that's when the magic happens. So thanks for listening to me today, and it's a privilege to get to hang out with you. So thank you very much. Now, how many of you remember Gremlins?
Well, I think that was the edutainment, most definitely. I can guarantee you will never hear that many Donner Party jokes in one setting, so we deserve an award or something. So next month is Black History Month. The originally scheduled presentation, the presenter just canceled on me about 45 minutes ago. So by gosh, that's the third one in the last 2 weeks. I'm having a nervous breakdown. So we will be doing something on that date about, that would tie in with Black History Month. So please do come here. I'm just not sure who the presenter is going to be right now. So it'll be a surprise, but it'll be educational, and it'll be awesome. So thank you again for coming, and have a wonderful week.
Yeah.